She froze as ice-cold water cascaded down her back, each heavy drop a cruel reminder that to him, she was beneath notice, just another faceless girl in the dark. Her blouse clung to her skin, a second prison of wet fabric that itched with shame and stung with betrayal. He laughed, casting her humiliation into the night like a careless stone. In that moment, she tasted loneliness so sharp it could have been poison, and vowed that no one would ever underestimate her again. Little did he know, the woman he thought he'd broken was the very force destined to shatter his world. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today, and if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. A heavy, silver sky pressed down over the quiet streets of Brookhaven as dusk settled like a velvet curtain. The air carried the scent of damp pavement and honeysuckle. A sweet tang mingled with the faint, acrid memory of the midday heat. Streetlights flickered on, halos of golden haze breaking the gathering gloom, and a gentle breeze tugged at the loose pages of flyers plastered against lampposts. Community safety meeting, Lost Cat Summer Fair. The town felt poised on the edge of slumber, as though it were holding its breath for something to stir, something that might shatter the fragile calm. Emily Caldwell stood on the narrow front porch of her rented row house, one hand curled around a chipped ceramic mug of steaming tea. She drew in a slow breath, letting the warmth seep into her bones, then exhaled, watching the tendrils of steam dissolve into the twilight. The porch light above her cast a soft glow, illuminating the faded teal door and the potted geraniums she had coaxed into bloom earlier that spring. Her gaze drifted to the street beyond, where a lone police cruiser idled at the corner, lights off, engine humming. Even at this hour, Officer Mason's patrol was a fixture, a silent reminder that Brookhaven kept a wary eye on its own. Emily's jaw clenched as she recalled the morning's events. Her promotion denied, the final rejection letter slipping through her mailbox like a chase she couldn't outrun. At 32, she had worked tirelessly to climb the ranks of the Brookhaven Public Library, first as an assistant, then as a cataloger, now as the acting head of community outreach. She believed in the power of stories to heal, to connect, to change minds. But something in the library board's decision had told her that a black woman, no matter how gentle or erudite, would remain a footnote rather than a headline. The sting of it still pulsed in her chest, a dull ache that neither tea nor fresh air could fully chase away. The library's grand oak doors had felt heavy that afternoon, as if they were barring her from a future she deserved. She'd lingered a moment in the empty lobby, sunlight filtering through stained glass windows and casting fractured rainbows on the marble floor. Shelves of dusty volumes stood sentinel, waiting for the next seeker to uncover their secrets. But instead of comfort, Emily felt a widening chasm between herself and the world she'd loved since childhood, a world she now realized could be indifferent, even hostile, to people who looked like her. A soft rustle in the chrysanthemums below drew her gaze downward. A moth with delicate, pale wings fluttered among the blossoms, its movements erratic yet determined. Emily watched its dance, feeling a kinship with the fragile creature's persistence. She pressed a finger through the porch rail and imagined guiding the moth back to safety, shielding it from unseen dangers. Just as she lifted her hand, the porch light flickered and went out, plunging her into near darkness. She blinked, startled, then slid inside, closing the door with an almost ceremonial finality. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of old paper and lavender sachets. A slender beam of streetlight slanted through the frosted window pane, illuminating her worn sneakers and the pile of unopened correspondence on the doormat. Projects she had championed, after-school reading circles, literacy drives for underprivileged children, lay in neat stacks, waiting for approval. Instead, she had found only red ink and polite refusals, accompanied by the unspoken judgment that her ambitions somehow exceeded her place. In the kitchen, Emily set her mug on the counter and ran her fingers through her tight curls, coaxing her thoughts into order. She wondered how long she could pretend that everything would turn around, that the next interview or proposal would be the one to break through the barriers. Across town, Officer Nathan Mason, tall, white, newly promoted, would never know this weight she carried. To him, she was just another face in his nightly rounds, one he barely registered unless something went wrong. And tonight, as always, he made his rounds with an air of casual authority, convinced that civility still reigned. Emily eased into the living room, her leather-bound journal open on the coffee table. She had taken to writing her frustrations down in ink, hoping that the act of recording them might lessen their hold. With a practiced hand, she began to sketch out her vision for a new outreach program. Mobile book vans that would bring literature to neighborhoods the library had never reached, to children who thought reading was a privilege. She noted budgets, potential sponsors, logistics, every detail documented with precision and hope. But beneath the tidy columns and bullet points lay a simmering fire of anger and defiance. She refused to believe that the world she cherished would remain closed to her dreams. A sudden knock at the door startled her, fingers pausing above the page. Heart thumping, she rose to answer, peering through the peephole. The silhouette outside was indistinct, but the shape of a hat and the broad shoulders told her all she needed to know. She hesitated, then swung the door wide. Officer Mason stood there, hands in his pockets, hat tilted back on his head. His uniform was crisp, badge gleaming. He offered her a polite nod. "Evening, Miss Caldwell," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Sorry to bother you at home. There's been reports of water, spills, drips outside on Main Street. I thought you might know something about it." He gestured toward the street, where pocked reflections of neon signs shivered on the asphalt. "What? No, I haven't seen anything," Emily replied, surprise mingling with caution. She studied him, noting the tilt of his jaw, the way his eyes flickered with something she couldn't place. Concern? Suspicion? A casual troublemaking impulse? He shrugged, glancing down at his shoes. "Just doing my job. Wanted to make sure you were safe. Nice night for a walk, though." He offered a thin smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then, as if caught by a sudden thought, he leaned forward. "If you notice anything at all, call the precinct, right?" His tone suggested more than polite courtesy. It held a subtle challenge, as though he doubted she would. Emily forced herself to nod. "Of course. Thank you, Officer Mason." She closed the door before he could reply further, leaving the corridor lit only by a single bulb overhead. She waited, listening to the heartbeat of her home, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the wall clock, until the silence convinced her that he had moved on. She returned to the journal, but the words refused to come. Instead, she pressed her forehead to the cool pages, tasting the faint trace of ink. A single drop of tea, spilled in her distraction, dappled the corner of the page. She watched as the liquid spread, darkening the fibers and warping the lines she had so carefully drawn. Irritation flared, and she swept the journal aside. As she stood in the muted glow of her living room lamp, Emily felt a strange sense of foreboding. The air outside had grown colder, as though the night itself were turning against her. Somewhere in the stillness, water dripped, just a solitary, persistent drip echoing through the empty street. It sounded too deliberate to be accidental, too precise to be innocent. In that moment, Emily understood that her struggles would soon transcend the confines of library politics and paperwork. Something was brewing beyond the pages of her proposals, beyond the polite facades of small-town civility. The drip in the night was a harbinger, a clue that the world she knew harbored deeper currents of power and prejudice, currents she would soon find herself swept into. Closing her eyes, she imagined the moth again, wings fragile against the dark, yet driven by an instinct to survive. She envied its certainty, a path defined by instinct, unclouded by politics or fear. Emily inhaled, straightened her shoulders, and picked up her mug. She would not cower. Tomorrow she would step outside, find the source of that drip, and confront whatever lay waiting. For all her doubts and disappointments, she still believed in justice, in the power of truth. And even as the night pressed in, she felt, like the moth, A week later, under a sky the color of pewter, Emily Caldwell made her way to the renovated community center on Elm Street. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a low dais where local leaders and police officers would discuss safety measures. Emily carried her notebook and pen in one hand and a tumbler of iced water in the other, her own touch of comfort against the nervous flutter in her chest. She had arrived early to set up a small display of her mobile library concept, complete with colorful posters and sample children's books. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed softly, and the air smelled faintly of bleach and old linoleum. She arranged her display beneath a banner that read Brookhaven Unity Forum, her fingers lingering on the glossy edges. Around her, volunteers tested microphones, and a woman from the PDA fussed with a vase of daisies on the speaker's table. Emily smiled at them, answered their questions, and felt, despite the morning chill, the warmth of communal hope pulsing through the room. This was her world, a place where stories could bridge divides and transform lives. If only the library board could see it as she did. She glanced at her watch. 30 minutes until start. Through the open doorway came a familiar figure. Officer Nathan Mason, in crisp uniform, his badge catching the light. He carried himself with that same cool composure she remembered from her porch steps. As he strode toward the dais, he paused at her table. "Miss Caldwell," he said, voice polite but clipped. "I didn't expect to see you here so early." He nodded at the books. "Nice setup." "Thank you," Emily replied, heart thudding. "I wanted to greet everyone before the crowd arrives." She tucked a loose curl behind her ear. "I hope you'll support our outreach in the northern neighborhoods." Mason's eyes darkened briefly, then he smiled, a thin, practiced expression. "We'll see," he said, then turned and drifted toward the seating area. Emily felt a prickling at the back of her neck, a faint warning she chose to ignore. She was used to skepticism, had learned to rise above it. She returned to her table, straightened a stack of books, and took a sip of water. Moments later, the forum filled. Citizens of Brookhaven, some families, some seniors, a few curious teenagers settled into chairs. City council members took their seats on the dais, and Mayor Thompson tapped the microphone. Applause followed. Emily watched from the side, notebook in lap, as introductions began. When her turn came, she stepped forward, heart-hammering, and outlined her vision. Vans stocked with books traveling from block to block, volunteers fostering reading circles in parks and rec centers. She spoke of hope, of unity, of giving every child a chance. The audience responded politely, clapping when she finished, but as she returned to her seat, the spotlight shifted to Officer Mason, called upon to present new public safety initiatives. He spoke of increased patrols, surveillance cameras in low-income areas, and stricter enforcement of minor offenses. His words were measured, but his tone carried an undercurrent of distrust, an implication that certain neighborhoods in Brookhaven were breeding grounds for trouble. Emily's stomach clenched. She recognized the message beneath his words. That safety meant policing first, understanding later. She felt a surge of anger, but kept her expression calm, waiting for her moment to speak again. When the floor opened to questions, she raised her hand. "Officer Mason," she began, voice clear, "you propose more patrols in the northern districts. But would it not be more effective to invest in community programs like literacy drives that address root causes of crime?" A few heads nodded. Mason paused, then leveled his gaze on her. "Miss Caldwell," he said, voice smooth, "I respect your passion for books. But the reality on our streets is more urgent. A safety officer cannot wait for stories to defeat violence." He glanced at the audience, as though seeking their agreement. "We need action, not fairy tales." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some applauded. Emily's jaw tightened. She realized their words, her gentle proposals, might never seem urgent enough. She felt the eyes of the room pressing on her, weighing her worth. For a moment, the dais felt like an arena. As the session wound down, Emily gathered her materials. Outside, a thin drizzle began, falling in soft, gray sheets. She stepped into the wet air, raindrops tapping against her tumbler lid. She debated heading straight home, but paused when she saw Mason lingering by his cruiser, lights off. He watched her, arms crossed, raindrops beating on his shoulders. Taking a deep breath, Emily approached. "Officer Mason," she said. He looked up, and she sensed a flicker of something: curiosity? Impatience? She held his gaze. "I wasn't attacking your work back there. I just believe in prevention over punishment." He raised an eyebrow. "Prevention," he repeated. "Tell me, Ms. Caldwell, how do you prevent prejudice?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were cold. Before she could answer, he reached behind his cruiser seat, retrieved a half-full water bottle, and cocked an eyebrow at her with a hint of mockery. "Like this?" he said, suddenly leveling the nozzle at her chest. Time slowed as Emily's eyes widened. Rain plastered her curls against her scalp. She slid her tumbler into her coat pocket. Mason tipped the bottle, pouring a sudden stream of icy water over her chest. The shock of cold seared through her, drenching her blouse and dripping down her jacket. Emily gasped, the water splashing at her feet, blending with the rain-soaked pavement. For a heartbeat, she stood still, stunned by the humiliation and the cruelty. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The mist blurred Mason's smirk as he withdrew the bottle. He looked at her coat, then at her face, and shrugged one shoulder. "Prejudice can be practical, too," he said softly before turning on his heel and walking away, leaving Emily dripping under the gray sky. Shivering, Emily pressed her hands to her sides, feeling the chill seep into her bones. The street was empty except for the humming cruiser. Her heart thundered with betrayal and rage. Had no one seen? Had no one cared? She stared at the asphalt, darkened by rain and her spilled water. Something inside snapped. The fragile hope she carried felt sullied by this act of contempt. Yet beneath the sting and the cold, an ember glowed. Emily felt it kindle in her chest, a fierce determination that this would not stand. She clenched her fists and imagined Mason's uniform torn away, revealing the fear and insecurity beneath his badge. She would show him what real strength looked like. He would regret underestimating her. As she retreated toward home, each step echoed like a promise. The world had tried to drown her, to silence her voice. But Emily Caldwell, though soaked and shaking, refused to be erased. She would uncover the motives behind this humiliation, expose the man who poured water on her dignity, and whatever it took, she would reclaim her power. In that moment, the storm around her felt small compared to the tempest stirring within. Emily woke before dawn the next morning, her mind still echoing with the cold sting of water and Mason's mocking voice. She lay on her back, staring at the pale glow of the street lamp through her bedroom curtains, and felt the weight of yesterday pressing on her chest. Beneath the ache of humiliation, a steady pulse of anger and resolve throbbed. She could almost see its shape, a small, bright ember in her heart. She dressed in careful layers, white button-down navy blazer, black slacks, and paused in front of the mirror. Her reflection showed dark circles beneath eyes that refused to close completely. She smoothed a loose curl from her forehead and tightened her jaw. Today she would meet her friend and confidant Sarah Williams over coffee at the local cafe. Sarah, a social worker with a heart for justice, would know what to say. The cafe smelled of fresh bread and coffee grounds as Emily slid into the booth. Steam curled from 2 mugs, 1 cappuccino, 1 herbal tea. Sarah arrived moments later, her warm smile doing battle with concern in her eyes. "I heard what happened," Sarah said quietly, settling beside her. "Are you okay?" Emily sank into the seat, clutching her mug. "I'm furious," she admitted. "How dare he treat me like that? A public servant pouring water on me, mocking my work." Sarah reached across the table, covering Emily's hand. "He's threatened by your strength. A black woman leading change, it scares him." Her voice was calm but fierce. "You have every right to fight back." Emily exhaled shakily. "I need evidence. I can't just accuse a police officer without proof. But I want him held accountable." Sarah nodded. "Let me see what I can find. Reports, complaints. You aren't alone in this." She sipped her tea. "And think about who else might help. Maybe Detective Mark Redding? Later, Emily sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through her laptop. Her mobile outreach proposal sat close beside her. Its neat pages felt trivial now. She drafted an email to Detective Redding, explaining the incident and requesting a meeting. Fingers hovered above the keys, heart pounding. When she finally pressed send, a jolt of relief rippled through her. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Nathan Mason sipped his coffee in the precinct's break room. He stared out the window at the early morning patrol cars, considering how to respond to Emily's bravado. To him, she was an outsider, an educated black woman threatening the status quo. He tapped his badge, its weight heavy in his pocket. Lieutenant Peters joined him, folding a newspaper. "You okay, Mason? Heard you got called in by Internal Affairs." Mason's jaw tightened. "Just routine. A complaint from Caldwell." He used her name as though tasting it cold, clipped, "She thinks I assaulted her with water." Peters chuckled, shaking his head. "You poured water on her. She had every right to complain." Mason leaned forward. It was a joke, a harmless tease. "She's too sensitive, but now she's making it political." He waved dismissively. "I've got a meeting with Redding this afternoon." Peters folded the paper, eyes narrowing with sympathy. "Be careful. Redding's thorough, and he doesn't like power plays." He patted Mason's shoulder. "Don't let this derail your promotion." Mason bristled at the mention of promotion. He'd worked years for that rank. "I won't." But inside, his confidence wavered. Back at home, Emily heard her phone ping. Redding's office had agreed to an appointment at 3. She exhaled, surprised by a flicker of hope. Her pulse slowed. Someone in uniform might finally take her seriously. She spent the morning preparing, rereading her notes, gathering witnesses. At midday, her brother Michael arrived unannounced, brushing raindrops from his leather jacket. Michael, a recent college graduate and aspiring journalist, looked at her with wide concern. "I heard about Mason," he blurted. "I'm so sorry." Emily managed a tired smile. "I'll be fine. I've got support." Michael sat beside her. "I've been digging. Found online posts about his temper, a few traffic stop complaints." He slid a folder across the table. "Maybe this can help." Her eyes widened at the evidence he'd collected, emails from residents, a video clip of Mason shouting at a teenager. "Thank you," she whispered. Michael shrugged, uneasy. "I just want to help." When they parted, Emily carried the folder with renewed determination. By afternoon, she stood in the austere hallway of Internal Affairs, clutching her proposal and Michael's findings. Doors numbered with bureaucratic precision lined the corridor. She exhaled, smoothing her blazer, and entered Redding's office. Detective Mark Redding sat behind a desk piled with files. His salt and pepper hair and deliberate calm gave the room a sober authority. He gestured to a chair. "Miss Caldwell," he said, voice neutral. "Tell me what happened." Emily recounted the forum, Mason's speech, and the water incident. Redding listened, arms folded, expression unreadable. When she finished, he opened a drawer and produced a thick notebook. "I've had a few whispers," he admitted, "but no formal complaints until now." She slid Michael's folder across. "These are from residents, emails, a video. He's abusing his power." Redding flipped through pages, nodding slowly. "This is substantial." He looked up. "I'll open an investigation. But you understand, these things take time. And you may face pushback." Emily nodded, steeling herself. "I understand, but I can't let him walk free." Outside the station, rain had returned, fine and insistent. Emily tucked her documents into a waterproof envelope. The air smelled of damp asphalt and ozone, electric with possibility and threat. Over the next days, tensions in Brookhaven began to swell. At the library, Emily sensed cold shoulders from colleagues who feared her clash with the police. Her mentor, Gregory Hall, offered quiet encouragement but urged caution. "Don't burn bridges," he warned, concern creasing his brow. "You have a career to build." Emily hated that advice, hated how easily her principles conflicted with survival. She knew Hall meant well, but compromise felt like betrayal. She smiled, politely, and refocused on the investigation. Mason, too, felt the pressure. Redding's assistant had questioned him twice, and rumors of an internal probe circulated at the precinct. His fellow officers gave curt salutations, eyes flicking away. Mason's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug as he replayed the encounter with Emily. Had he gone too far? The laughter in his head faltered. At home one night, he sat in his living room, uniform hung neatly on a chair. His phone buzzed, a text from Lieutenant Peters, "Stay calm. Keep your head down." Beneath it, another message, a link to a forum post mocking him. He closed his eyes, imagining his promotion slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, Emily grew restless. She pored over legal statutes and precedents. She contacted local journalists, hoping to shine light on the case. Her vision for community outreach shifted. Now it included a legal awareness program to educate citizens about their rights. She drafted slide decks and budgets, her creativity fueled by righteous purpose. One evening, Sarah delivered unexpected news. Over dinner, she asked, "Did you know Gregory once voted against you on the board?" Emily froze. "What? Why would he do that?" Sarah set down her fork, eyes serious. "He told a colleague he thought you were too ambitious. Said you'd be distracted by politics." Sarah sighed. "I'm sorry, Em. I didn't want to say." Betrayal hissed through Emily's veins. Gregory, her friend, her guide, had stood in her way. The warmth drained from her chest, replaced by a deep ache. She thought of his encouraging smiles, his late-night strategy sessions. Had they been false? Emily looked at Sarah, voice trembling. "He knew what I was up against, and he still blocked me?" Sarah reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry. You deserve people who'll have your back." That night, Emily lay awake, betrayal mingling with her anger toward Mason. Two adversaries closing in. One with a badge, the other in the guise of a mentor. Her world, once orderly, now felt fractured by hidden motives. But beneath the raw edges of hurt, a new resolve solidified. She would not only expose Mason's cruelty, she would confront every roadblock, seen and unseen, standing between her and justice, between her and her dreams. She would strip away false facades and reveal the truth. And as thunder rumbled in the distance, Emily closed her eyes on a vision. The community vans rolling through Brookhaven streets, children reaching eagerly for books, and her name on the door of the library office, recognized at last for her strength, her vision, and her courage. It was a future she would fight for with every ounce of her being. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of bruised purple, Emily sat in her small study surrounded by files and notes. The rain had finally relented, leaving the world washed clean, but she couldn't shake the feeling of grime clinging to her thoughts. Her mind replayed every angry word, every cold look, every hidden whisper of collusion that had surfaced in the last week. She took a deep breath and reached for the envelope Detective Redding had slipped across his desk, Michael's folder of complaints, emails, and that shaky footage. She meant to review it one last time before handing everything to the mayor's office, but when she pulled out the pages, her heart stuttered. On top lay a single sheet of paper, typed and stamped with confidential. In bold was a reference to her own name, Emily Caldwell, subject of interest. Beneath it, a list of departmental notes dated 2 days before her meeting with Redding. The first line read, "Individual demonstrates unusual persistence in challenging Officer Mason's directives. Potential risk to department reputation if escalated. Then, recommend monitoring of activities, consider psychological profile, and most damning of all at the bottom, coordinate with library board to neutralize influence." Emily's hand trembled as she realized what neutralize influence meant. This wasn't just routine inquiry. This was a plan to undermine her through the library board, through Gregory Hall, through any ally she trusted. She felt a cold rush of betrayal flood her chest. Detective Redding had agreed to investigate, but he was part of the conspiracy. She backed away from the desk, eyes hot with tears she refused to let fall. Her journal lay open, pages full of hope and strategy for the mobile library vans. Now, they looked like a trap. The very institution. Emily's breath hitched. Gregory, she asked, voice tight, why would he have confidential police files? Sarah exhaled slowly. He's on the library board's security committee. He has contacts in the precinct through his cousin, who's a lieutenant. They share information. Her tone was flat, almost hollow. He told me you needed to see the truth. Emily's mind reeled. He shared internal affairs files with you? Without my permission? So he could, what? Warn me? Or set me up? Sarah shook her head, tears gathering. I found out he was voting against your proposals, but I thought it was just politics. Then I overheard him at a fundraiser, the one where the mayor and the chief of police were both present. They applauded him when he said Emily's program was overreaching and distracting resources from public safety. Sarah's voice cracked. He's the link between them and the library board. He's been feeding them intel on you, Emily. A bitter ache lodged in Emily's throat. She thought of Gregory's quiet encouragement, the late evenings he'd spent helping her craft presentations. She'd confided in him, her fears, her hopes, her anger at Mason. He'd nodded and offered kind counsel. All along, he'd been watching, reporting, betraying. How long? She whispered. Sarah glanced around. Weeks, maybe months. He's been under pressure to keep the board aligned with the mayor's office. They promised him a permanent directorship at the county archives if he kept Emily in line. Emily felt the world tilt. Her mentor, the man she respected most, had traded her trust for a title. She recalled his remorseful eyes when the promotion was denied, his veiled warnings to be careful. It had been calculated, every word a step to isolate her. Anger flared hot and bright. She slammed her hand on the table. He'll pay for this, she vowed. Sarah reached out, but Emily brushed the hand away. No, she said, voice low. Not just him. Reading too. She pulled the confidential sheet from her bag and slid it across. He's part of it. He's monitoring me for them. Sarah's face paled. Then we can't trust anyone in the department. We need to go public, expose both of them. Emily's pulse raced. To expose Redding and Gregory would mean scandal, upheaval, a community shaken to its core. But she had no choice. Her reputation, her dignity, her entire mission hung in the balance. If she retreated now, the water incident would become a footnote, a cruel anecdote with no consequences. But if she moved forward, she closed her eyes and pictured the children waiting in neighborhoods without books, the families hungry for programs that might change their lives. She thought of her own reflection, eyes tired but unbowed. She picked up her phone and tapped out a message. I'm ready. Let's do this. The next morning, a press conference was arranged at the town hall plaza. News vans lined the curb, anchors and reporters shuffling behind cameras. Emily stepped onto the stone steps, Sarah at her side, Michael behind her with a folder stuffed with evidence. The sun was a pale or behind drifting clouds, as though the sky itself felt the weight of the moment. Mayor Thompson approached, microphone in hand. Ms. Caldwell, he began, voice smooth. We are here to address serious allegations concerning Officer Nathan Mason and, regrettably, administrative involvement from within the library board. His eyes flicked momentarily to Gregory, standing stiffly at the edge of the plaza, face set in a mask of control. Gregory's lips twitched. Grief? Defiance? Emily couldn't tell. The mayor gestured to the assembled press. Ms. Caldwell has presented evidence of an unprovoked act of humiliation by Officer Mason, as well as documentation revealing coordination between certain library board members and departmental leadership to undermine her initiatives. He paused, letting the words settle. We take these matters very seriously. Microphones clustered toward Emily. She stepped forward, steeling herself. Flashbulbs popped. Her heart thrummed, but her voice held firm. I am here not for revenge, but for justice, she began, eyes across the plaza fixed on her. Curious citizens, skeptical colleagues, strangers passing by. Last week, a police officer drenched me in water in public, an act of hate disguised as a joke. I reported it, expecting an impartial investigation. Instead, I discovered a plot to discredit me, orchestrated by individuals I once trusted. She held up the confidential memo. This document, approved by Internal Affairs, labels me a risk to the department's reputation and calls for neutralizing my influence, not through dialogue, but through the very board meant to support community growth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She fixed her gaze on Gregory. Gregory Hall, my mentor and a member of the library board, colluded with police leadership to block my program and humiliate me. Gregory's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Cameras swung to him. Reporters raised questions he could not answer. Emily turned back to the microphone. I have lost faith in those who pledged to protect public safety and nurture community well-being. Yet I have gained new resolve and a deeper understanding of what true leadership requires: courage, transparency, and unwavering commitment to justice. She paused, letting her next words resonate. So today, I call upon Mayor Thompson to remove Officer Mason from duty pending full review, to reform internal affairs processes, and to appoint an independent oversight committee for the library board. Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then cheers broke out from a group of parents and teachers at the edge of the plaza. Sarah and Michael beamed at her. The mayor cleared his throat, nodding. Gregory stood motionless, head bowed. Emily stepped down from the steps, chest heaving. The sun emerged from behind a cloud, sending a single shaft of light onto the plaza. It felt like a blessing, or perhaps a promise of change. As she walked away, reporters calling after her, Emily realized that the first twist in her journey had ripped away illusions and revealed the true enemies. Not only a reckless cop, but the corruption hidden in plain sight. She did not yet know where the next betrayal would come, or how deep the rot extended. But she felt stronger, sharper, more alive than ever before. The fight ahead would be harder than she imagined, but now she understood the stakes, and she would never be deceived again. Rain drummed against the windows of Emily's study as she stared at the morning headlines. The Brookhaven Gazette's banner read, "Library Scandal, Caldwell versus Cop and Board." Beneath it, a grainy photo showed Emily at yesterday's press conference, chin lifted, eyes blazing with conviction. Her heart pounded. This was the moment she dreamed of, spotlight on her vision. And yet, her chest clenched with a warning. Every step forward also widened the gap between her and safety. A sharp knock at the door startled her. Michael burst in, face pale. "Em, you have to see this." He held up his phone, a threatening message from an anonymous number. "Stop stirring trouble or you'll regret it." Emily's throat tightened. She pressed a hand to her side, remembering Mason's smirk, that sudden pour of cold water. Now he was emboldened by silence, by the lack of real consequences. She wondered, was this from him or someone worse, someone higher up? Downstairs, Sarah waited at the kitchen table, eyes red from sleepless nights. "They're digging into your past," she said, sliding a printed dossier across the counter. "Old school reports, your college interviews, even your childhood friends. They want something to tarnish your reputation." Emily scanned the pages, teasing from childhood lunchrooms, a few high school missteps, nothing serious, but ripe for sensationalism. An anonymous tipster had already whispered to a blogger that she had once lied on a grant application. "They'll twist anything," Sarah whispered. Emily closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to the cool tabletop. She was fighting for justice for every unheard voice in Brookhaven. Yet even her own story was now a weapon against her. She looked at Michael and Sarah, their faces etched with concern. "We can't back down," she said, voice trembling but firm. "We have to control the narrative. Show them who I really am." She pictured a kinder version of herself, the child who found refuge in libraries and promised to bring that refuge to others. She could not let fear, nor false rumors, steal that promise. Over the next days, Emily threw herself into action. She organized a live-streamed open library day, inviting citizens to tour the stacks, meet volunteers, and share stories of how reading had changed their lives. Sarah coordinated security, arranging for trusted community leaders to patrol entry points. Michael wrote a balanced article for his college paper, focusing on Emily's achievements rather than the scandal. Emily practiced her opening remarks in front of her living room mirror, each word chosen to. At each council session, board members raised procedural objections. The proposal was too costly, duplicative of existing services, not within the library's charter. Emily watched her vision unravel under the weight of bureaucratic minutiae and thinly veiled hostility. One evening, in the quiet hush before dawn, Emily sat alone in the darkened library's grand reading room. The amber glow of the lone lamp illuminated rows of books she had once walked among like old friends. She traced her fingertips along leather spines, each title a testament to human curiosity and resilience. In the silence, her doubts surged. Was she naive to believe a small program could shift deep-rooted power structures? Had her fight become more about her ego than the children who needed books? She pressed her palms to her eyes, struggling to hold back tears for the first time. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Detective Mark Redding appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. His arrival set her heart racing. Was this support or another ambush? He closed the distance quietly. "I have updates," he said, voice low. Emily straightened, bracing herself. Redding slid into a seat across the table. "I've uncovered emails linking Mason to the mayor's re-election campaign," he began. "There's pressure on the mayor to keep Mason's public safety image strong. That explains the fund diversion." He paused, assessing her. "They're playing chess. You're a pawn." Emily's breath caught. If the mayor's office and Mason's allies were entangled, the stakes were higher than personal humiliation. They were political. "What's the play?" she asked. Redding leaned forward. "We need to expose this link publicly. But we must be strategic. If we go too hard, the mayor will clamp down on the library itself." He tapped a folder. "I've prepared a joint statement with documented evidence. We present it at tomorrow's council meeting, backed by community testimonials. Turn public opinion in your favor and force the mayor's hand." Emily studied the rows of books as if they might whisper guidance. She felt torn. The council meeting was her chance to reclaim funding, but would drawing more attention risk retaliation? Sarah had warned of threats. Michael's article could be attacked as biased, and yet to stay silent was to allow the city's leaders to rewrite the story without challenge. She closed her eyes, imagining the children waiting on benches for the vans that might never come. "I'm in," she said. "Let's do it." The next day's council chamber felt colder than the library's hush. A row of cameras lined the back wall. Board members sat in rigid clusters, their alliances as visible as badges. Elizabeth Price, a senior board member and longtime critic of Emily's outreach, sat beside an empty seat marked Mayor Thompson. Emily stepped to the podium, heart pounding but voice steady. She began with testimonials. A single mother who'd learned to read street signs, a teenager whose college essay had won a scholarship, a retiree whose book club had saved her from loneliness. As murmurs of empathy drifted through the room, with each story, Emily regained a piece of her momentum. Then she pressed on, revealing Mason's political ties, reading select emails, and quoting Redding's findings. Board members shifted uneasily as the mayor entered and took his seat. A hush fell. Emily's final words were a direct plea. Invest in our future or allow fear to define it. The choice is yours. Silence cracked as Price pounded her gavel, announcing a recess for the mayor's statement. Emily stepped down, shaking but resolute. Outside the chamber, Sarah and Michael flanked her. Reporters pressed questions. She answered with calm determination. Then through the crowd, she spotted Gregory Hall, watching from a distance, face pale, no sign of remorse, only calculation. That evening, a flurry of news alerts confirmed a breakthrough. The mayor had announced a temporary freeze on Mason's program and pledged to review funding allocations. Headlines hailed Emily's resounding victory and people-powered change. Emily allowed herself a small smile. Yet, as she closed her laptop, the weight of exhaustion settled in her bones. She thought of Mason's cold eyes, of Gregory's betrayal, and realized this was only the beginning. Deep inside, a new dilemma had taken root. How far was she willing to go to expose corruption and protect her vision? Could she sacrifice the fragile alliances she still relied on? Was winning worth the risk of turning her beloved library into a battleground? As dusk fell outside her window, Emily Caldwell sat alone again, the hum of fluorescent bulbs overhead reminding her that the world never rested, and neither could she. The rain began again at midnight, a steady drum on the library's copper roof. Inside the grand reading room, rows of books stood like silent witnesses to the conflicts of Brookhaven, their spines glowing amber in the low lamplight. Emily Caldwell paced the center aisle, mind alight with urgency. Tomorrow's city council vote would decide the fate of her mobile library vans, and more importantly, whether Brookhaven's leaders would stand for justice or bow to fear. Her cell phone buzzed. Detective Mark Redding's text. I confirmed the mayor's private meeting with Mason and his campaign donors tonight at the country club. They plan to force you out. Emily's pulse thundered. She slipped on her coat, grabbed Michael's hard drive of evidence, and stepped into the storm. At the country club's wrought iron gates, looming like a fortress, Sarah waited in her raincoat. Her face was pale with worry. They've locked the main doors, she whispered, but there's a service entrance around back. They skirted along the hedge-lined side, waterlogged grass squishing underfoot, until they found a dimly lit door marked staff only. Sarah pressed the latch. It opened with a creak, revealing a corridor thick with the scent of polished wood and spilled wine. Inside, a dozen suited figures clustered near a long mahogany table strewn with campaign brochures, champagne flutes, and the mayor's gold-plated pen. At the head stood Mayor Thompson, his shoulders squared as he leafed through Emily's proposal, marked with red pen corrections and reject stamps. Officer Nathan Mason lounged beside him, a smug smile curved at his lips. Gregory Hull hovered off to one side, whispering into the mayor's ear. The air crackled with betrayal. Emily's breath caught. This was their plan, to humiliate her one final time, to strip her of every ounce of credibility. But she would not be a quiet casualty. She set her jaw and stepped forward, Michael at her heels, Redding's camera rig in hand to live-stream the confrontation. Sarah operated the light, illuminating the faces around the table. Mayor Thompson. Emily's voice rang through the hush. The men turned, startled, glasses clinking. Water dripped from her coat sleeve. The storm outside a mirror of the tension within. I thought this was a private fundraiser, she said evenly, but clearly it's also a meeting to destroy community hope. Mason's smirk faltered as recognition dawned. How did you? A live stream, Emily said, tapping Michael's shoulder. On his phone screen, the feed began, a steady count of viewers climbing. Brookhaven deserves to see the truth. Thompson rose, face a mask of practiced calm. Ms. Caldwell, you have no right to trespass. I have every right, she interrupted, stepping into the circle. You're conspiring to defund vital outreach programs because you fear progress and because Mason and his backers want to keep this city under control through fear. She gestured to the red-inked proposal. You marked this too costly, but you fund militarized policing without question. Gregory's eyes widened. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Mason's shoulders twitched with anger. Thompson straightened his tie. You're making wild accusations. Emily pulled from her pocket an envelope of printed emails. These prove you met tonight to coordinate your campaign strategy, discussing how to overcome public support for literacy initiatives. She held them up. You promised to allocate my funds back to the children, Mayor. Yet here you are, drafting your election speech. She locked eyes with Thompson. How dare you lie to the people who elected you? Silence pressed so heavily that a single raindrop inside the room echoed like a gunshot. Then Mason strode forward, badge glinting in the lamp. You think you can bulldoze us with your idealism? You'll be gone by morning. Redding stepped in front of Emily, camera trained on Mason. Officer Mason, he said calmly, you're under investigation for abuse of power. Strip search requests, humiliating civilians, political collusion. This list grows every day. You will answer for it. Mason's face blanched. He glanced toward Thompson, who paled in turn. That's a lie. Mason snapped. You can't prove. You're on record, Emily said softly. Your texts to the campaign, your messages to the board, your threats to me. Gregory lowered his gaze. I was wrong, he whispered. They promised me a future. I couldn't see. His voice broke. I'm sorry. Emily's chest ached with betrayal's sharp edges. She remembered his kind words, his mentorship, her pride in their partnership. But regret alone could not undo his deeds. She turned away, letting the rain-wet hem of her coat brush the floor. I hope you find better choices next time, she said, voice distant. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm pressed against the windows like a world redeemed. The camera light captured every flashed emotion. Mason's fury, Thompson's shame, Gregory's remorse. Emily straightened, voice rising. Brookhaven, this city is stronger than fear. It's built on stories, on shared hopes and open hearts. I stand here tonight, soaked and betrayed, but unbowed. I promise you, we will not be silenced. We will open those library vans. We will bring books to every child. And we will hold our leaders accountable. A crack of thunder punctuated her vow. Reporters snapped photos, council members gasped, citizens watching online applauded with digital hearts and cheers. This was her climax, the raw moment when truth shattered falsehoods, when courage overcame collusion. In the aftermath, the city surged with demand for change. By dawn, the mayor announced his resignation. A special election was scheduled within weeks. Officer Mason was suspended pending a full inquiry. Internal Affairs was overhauled under independent oversight. Gregory Hall stepped down from the library board in disgrace, dedicating himself to repair. He volunteered to drive the first mobile van, hoping to earn back trust. Emily stood on the library's front steps at early sunrise, the first vans, white, gleaming, emblazoned with Brookhaven bookmobile, parked in neat rows. Families gathered, sleepy children pressed faces to windows, volunteers carried boxes of books and art supplies. Sarah, Michael, and Redding flanked her, each a testament to solidarity in action. Emily inhaled the crisp morning air, tasting hope on her tongue. She remembered the moth on her first porch, fragile yet determined. She pictured it now, wings unfurling, ready to fly. She lifted a child, little Thomas, onto her hip and handed him a picture book about a brave knight. His eyes sparkled. She smiled, tears catching the light. Thank you, his mother said softly, placing a hand on Emily's arm. For everything. Emily nodded, pressing her palm to her heart. This is just the beginning, she whispered. Our story goes on. As the sun broke through the clouds, a golden beam illuminated the rows of vans set to deliver stories to every corner of Brookhaven. The storm had passed. What remained was community, a living, breathing testament to truth's power and hope's resilience. And Emily Caldwell, once a wounded librarian, now stood as police chief in disguise no more, but as Brookhaven's true champion, her own story unfolding in every page turned. The morning after the bookmobiles rolled out, Brookhaven felt different, a city waking from a long winter, its streets bright with possibility. Emily Caldwell stood before the library, watching as families lined up for story time under striped awnings. Volunteers helped children select books. Sarah Williams organized craft stations. Even Gregory Hall, sleeves rolled up, guided toddlers to story corners. The air hummed with laughter and turning pages, a living testament to the work they had fought so hard to realize. But before the day could fully bloom, a black SUV rolled to a halt at the curb. Its door opened to reveal Mayor Thompson's successor, Chief of Police Cassandra Cassie Langford, Emily's own name, though none yet recognized her. She stepped onto the pavement in crisp uniform, navy jacket with silver braid, badge glinting like a promise. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Parents narrowed their eyes in surprise. Emily slipped forward, heart pounding with purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, Cassie announced, voice firm yet warm. She removed her hat, letting loose a cascade of curls. I am Chief Langford, formerly Deputy Chief, now elevated to lead this department. Until today, I served you as Emily Caldwell, Community Outreach Coordinator at the library. Murmurs swelled. She raised a hand. I chose to disguise my rank so I could see Brookhaven's true face, to understand your needs, to hear your stories without prejudice, to live among you as equals. I have walked your streets, shared your struggles, and now I stand before you as both your librarian and your police chief. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, then burst into applause and relieved laughter. Parents embraced their children, volunteers cheered. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Michael cracked a proud smile. Even Gregory nodded, his expression a mix of awe and humility. At the back of the plaza, Nathan Mason stood frozen, uniform neat, but face drained of color. He glanced from Emily to Cassie, confusion warring with realization. The woman he had drenched in scorn, the powerful force who had dismantled his schemes, the champion of Brookhaven's children, she was the chief he was sworn to serve. His jaw trembled. Cassie met his gaze, calm and unyielding. "Officer Mason," she said, voice soft but carrying across the plaza, "you understand the weight of justice better than most. You chose cruelty over compassion. Today, you have a chance to choose differently." Mason swallowed, eyes rimmed with regret. He stepped forward, shoulders hunched. "Chief Langford," he began, voice cracking, I'm sorry. I saw you only as a target, a symbol of change I feared. I thought you were just another civilian, easy to push aside." He looked to Emily's steady form. "I beg your forgiveness, and I offer my service to this community if you will still have me." A hush settled. Cassie exchanged a glance with Sarah and Michael. Then she inclined her head. "Redemption begins with acknowledgement. You will face the internal board, but I will recommend your transfer to community liaison. There, your actions will speak louder than your past missteps." Mason exhaled, relief and shame mingling in his eyes. He bowed his head. "Thank you, Chief. I won't fail you again." Cassie turned back to the crowd. "Brookhaven's strength lies in the bonds we forge, the stories we share, and the trust we place in one another. Today we begin a new chapter, one written by all of us together." She stepped down, Emily's civilian guise slipping away as she reclaimed her uniformed mantle. Late that afternoon, in Cassie's modest corner office above the station, she paused at the window to watch the bookmobiles trundle down Maple Avenue. She thought of the children's eyes shining as they clutched new books, of her own morning, soaked in rain, yet filled with conviction, of the betrayals that had cut her deep and the truths that had set her free. The sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting bars of gold across her desk. Michael knocked and entered, holding a stack of letters from grateful families. "These came in while you were outside," he said, placing them gently by her coffee mug. "Everyone is full of thanks." Cassie smiled, touching the top envelope. "Open that one," she said. He unfolded the letter, reading aloud, "Dear Chief Langford, thank you for bringing stories to my daughter. You showed us that we matter. Maria Lopez." Michael looked up. "She's a single mom working 2 jobs. She said she thought the city forgot people like her." Cassie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of leadership settle into something warm and real. She thought of Sarah organizing trauma workshops for children frightened by uniforms, of Gregory volunteering to drive vans, of Redding quietly ensuring Mason followed through on his promise. Each had found their purpose anew. Later that evening, Cassie convened her new community liaison team in the library's conference room, a symbolic gesture merging law enforcement with literacy. Volunteers, police officers, city officials, and neighbor advocates filled the U-shaped table. At its head, Cassie lifted a bound copy of the mobile library proposal, now stamped with approved and funded. Tonight, she began, voice steady, we celebrate progress. But tomorrow, our work continues. We rebuild trust not through force, but through listening, service, and compassion. This library is our partner. These vans are our promise, and each of you is a guardian of this city's story. Sarah raised her hand. "Chief, we're organizing a reading circle at the Juvenile Center next week. Can police mentors join?" Cassie nodded. "Absolutely. Let's turn fear into friendship." She looked at Mason, seated near the back, shoulders straight. "Officer Mason, will you lead the first session?" He nodded, voice soft. "Yes, Chief." I'd be honored. As the meeting concluded, Cassie stepped into the corridor and paused. She let herself reflect on the road that had brought her here. The sting she had waged justice within and without. She had forgiven and demanded accountability. She had blurred the lines between protector and partner, acknowledging that true policing begins with empathy. The moral weight of that truth pressed on her. She had deceived her community, yet she had also honored them by learning their lives firsthand. She had placed herself in harm's way not for power, but for purpose. And in doing so, she had asked others to follow her into moral gray zones, to confront biases, to reconcile with failures, to choose integrity over indifference. In the hushed hallway, Chief Langford, once Emily Caldwell, pulled from her pocket a small journal. She opened to a blank page and wrote, "Justice is not a badge we wear, but a promise we keep. It demands honesty with ourselves, courage to face our worst impulses, and compassion for those we serve." She closed the journal, tucking it against her heart. The future lay unwritten, but she would embrace its challenges with steady hands and an open mind. Brookhaven had shown her that change comes through stories, stories we share, stories we challenge, stories we live. And so she would continue to write her own, as police chief, as librarian, as citizen, as guardian of hope. The night breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the faint echo of children's laughter from a street below. Cassie Langford inhaled deeply, tasting possibility. Her journey had ended one chapter and begun another. The city's story and her own were now inseparable, bound by the promise of justice, compassion, and the belief that every page turned brings us closer to understanding and to each other. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.